What'd you say it was, Dale? So what does that mean? Okay. We'll get there. We'll get there tonight. And by the way, if you say that, we'll give you a jelly bean, okay? We're going to learn about Hebron or Hebron. C-H-E-B-R-W-N. Hebron. We call it Hebron here in East Tennessee. And they call it Hebron over there in Israel. Hebron is one of those wonderful cities that we don't talk about much because it's not in the New Testament. Hebron is an Old Testament town, very, very important. The word Hebron in Hebrew means an agreement. There was a famous, world-famous, earth-shaking agreement that was made there a couple of thousand years ago, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And if you know what it is, just bide your time and maybe we can get another candy corn out of the deal here. The word means an agreement. It is in the Old Testament. All the scriptures that I have found, 67 of them are in the Old Testament. We won't look at all of them, and we won't finish tonight, but I'm going to shut her down about 5 minutes till 7, okay? And so, because we have other people that have got schedules that they're doing too, children's church and guys outside and all that. So I'm going to stop at about 5 till 7, whether we're through or not. If not, well, I'll be back. I'm coming back. I'll be back next Wednesday night, unless David does his thing and calls for a surgery on Wednesday or something. Then I'll call Jordan and he'll have to do it. Okay. But Hebron. See, in the Bible, these cities, there's no Atlantas and no New York cities. They're just Newports and Parrotsville's and Bobbies and things like that. And if it's a fairly good-sized town, it was probably a walled city, a village. Remember when Joshua fit the battle of Jericho? What happened? How did he fit the battle of Jericho? As RV used that expression Sunday morning. Did you catch it? He fit him. He fit me. The devil's fit me. RV's just like that, guys. When Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, what did he do? Nothing? Okay. But what happened to Jericho? He surrounded it, and what happened? The what fell down? The wall fell down. All these cities are walled cities, the big ones. Outside the city are suburbs where the farms are located. Like, for instance, when they went against Jericho, the walls fell down, but then they went against that little town of Hai, or Hai as we would pronounce it. Ai would be Hai in Hebrew. When they went against that city, they didn't have any walls. So walled cities. They had a king. They had money. They had a police force, an army, money supply, just like a little kingdom. The king of Hebron, the king of Bethlehem, the king of Jebus, the king of Nazareth, the king of all these little cities all around, walled villages, walled cities. And that's the way all of them were. When there comes to time that some big king takes over an area, he becomes a territorial king, like the king of Judah, or the king of the Hittites, or the king of Moab, or the king of Ammon, the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh. And they had different names. They could be called Pharaoh, it's just a word for king. Abimelech is a word for king. Czar, Caesar. Caesar is the Latin form of the word czar. In Russia, there was a czar, T-Z-A-R, or T-S-A-R, and Caesar is just that. So there's all these different words for the ruler. And Hebron is one of those towns that had a king and was named, later on, it became the word for Hebron. Before that, it was called, I hope I can pronounce it right, Q-I-R-Y-A-T-A, Kuryath/Arba. Kuryath, we pronounce it Kirjath, but they don't have the J sound in Hebrew, so Kuryath/Arba. Arba is a man's name. Kuryath is the name of the town. It was called in the Old Testament Kuryath/Arba. And some family name of Arba in Canaanite land owned that particular geographic area. And in the Old Testament, you'll see it listed. We'll look at some scriptures tonight of Kirjath Arba, or Kirjath Arba, which is the current day city of Hebron. It's very much in the news now. You don't see it much because they don't talk much about it. Did you get to go to Hebron? We went to Hebron. He didn't get to go. Difference in the two. Was my tour better than his? What was the difference? Because the timing. It is in the West Bank that we looked at last week. Hebron is in the West Bank. And I know, now listen guys, I know this. And like I say, I don't have any place, 5 minutes till we'll shop, and we'll be back next week. But you need to understand, the question always comes up, doesn't Israel own that? Doesn't Israel own Temple Mount? Why don't they take possession of it? You have to understand how they live every day under threat of annihilation. Inflation in the hundreds of percentages per year. It's amazing the people that are there, and the fact, yes, they did get the wall, they did get the Temple Mount in the 6-Day War, yes they did. And then they tried to appease the PLO and the Arabs and the people. It's like two people who have a title deed to the same piece of property. Both of them have a title deed. One person's got a title deed, you got no problem, right? If you die, you leave it to your heirs or whatever. It's yours. And I live at 125 Smoky View Lane. That's my house. In Australian Aborigine language, and my source comes from Crocodile Dundee, I could name it Belong to Me. The house belong to me. The house on that street belong to me. Because, well, me and the bank. Me and the loan department of the bank. I can do what I want to with it. I can sell it, or I can tear it down, I can build onto it, I can spend money or whatever. It's my house. I can do what I want to with it. Now that's the thing. You know that, and I know that. But let's talk about what the realistic world situation is. Suppose my next door neighbor came up and said, "By the way, here's my deed to this piece of property. Properly executed, properly notarized, properly thisified and thatified. Signed by Steve Johnson, the highest authority figure I could find. This is my title deed to this house." And I produce my title deed to this house. We both have a title deed to the same house. Then we got to worry. We got to go to the lawyers and let them get their money out of the deal. God gave to Abraham, he said, "Wherever you walk, I will give that to you. I will give that to you." Later on, they had to go in there and take it. They had to go in there and fight for it. Joshua had to go in there and fight for the land that God had given to Abraham and to his ancestors. Because our God made that statement, we say that's good enough for me. But suppose a person who believes in a God just as strongly as you believe in your God, and they say, "My God gave me this property." That's exactly what's happening. If Allah has given to the descendants of Abraham through Ishmael the property, and God has given to the descendants of Abraham through Isaac the property, that's the sticky wicket. I got it. I believe God gave it to them. I believe that Israel belongs there. Israel is in the land and should be in the land, and they own the land. But there are people who've got the title deed to it as well, documented by their God, and they believe just as strongly in that. Strongly enough to shoot you deader than 4 o'clock or cut your head off. That's how strongly they believe in it. I got that. I believe that, Ginger. So why isn't he stepping in there and taking over? Don't know. That's the problem. He's biding his time. One of these days, aren't you glad when you get to heaven, God's not going to say, let me tell you something, bud. I got a long memory, and I remember you. When you get to heaven, you don't want God to say, I've got a long memory. You want him to say, I done forgot all about your sins. But God is a God of long suffering. He expects us to go as far as we can go on the right road now. Hey, listen, just like if my neighbor says, I've got a title deed to this property and I've got a title deed to that property, then we're going to have to go somewhere and get somebody to work it out. Hebron is one of those communities. The word means agreement. Have you thought about that earth-shaking agreement that was made in that town about 4,000 years ago? This is not a trick question. That's an actual Polaroid picture of Abraham. It's been colorized because they didn't have color film back in those days. Abraham made an agreement. His name was Abram, which means high father, removed his tent and came and dwelled in the plain of Mamre, which means oak tree, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. So Abram has been there. His name was let me see if I'm the only one that has a problem with this. You shall call his name Yeshua, Jesus, because why? He shall save his people from their sins. In the Old Testament, there was another person named Yeshua that was named Yeshua. Did God say the same thing to his parents? We don't call him Jesus, we call him Joshua. It's the same word. Joshua and Jesus is the very same Hebrew word Yeshua. Now, Abram was named Abram when he was born. Now, Abram was not a Jew, he was not a Gentile. I mean, he was a Gentile, he wasn't a Christian. He was a pagan. Don't know if he was circumcised. Don't know if he wasn't. I know he wasn't, because later on he had to be. So, but he was named Abram, which means high father. Did his mom and dad know he was going to be a high father? Well, what's up with that? When Jacob in what's the language? The Old Testament language, Hebrew. When Jacob was born, his name was given Jacob, which means, in my language of Frog Pond, a con artist, a fast talker, a used car salesman. Got you. Okay. Did his father know that? Why would somebody name their son con artist? Why would that happen? His name was changed from Jacob, con artist, to Israel, prince with God. Were no what? Oh, there was one. He was one. He very definitely was one. But not like we would say. This guy didn't sit around and say, hey, guy, I got to, play some three-card, what's that game, three-card Monty? I thought you knew. I knew it too. I just wondered who was going to speak up. Yeah, you're right. I hear you. But he was a slick talker, a con artist. His name was changed to Israel. So his children, the children of Jacob, were now called the children of Israel. And there were 12 of those boys, and each of them became the leader of a family called a tribe. And so the tribes of Israel are the children of Jacob, the children of Jacob, whose name was changed. Abram, a high father, removed his tent, came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. This is just an isolated verse of Scripture, just to let you know. Here's an old map, just to let you kind of see basically where we're talking about. Hebron is right there. See it right there? In the mountain areas. Notice those little dashed lines. Little dashed lines right down here mean road, right? So where roads went, little cities sprung up. In our country, who discovered Cumberland Gap? D. Boone? You think Davy Crockett? Let's go back to the true people who discovered this country, not Columbus. Go on back to the Indians, the people. They were here when Columbus got here. You understand that, right? And Columbus never did get here anyhow. He was down in the south. But anyhow, in those days, the warpath between the tribes and the cow paths, cows are pretty smart. They can find the easiest path, can't they? I know you think they're dumb. I realize that because you deal with them all the time. But creeks can find the easiest path to get, so you follow the creeks. The roads go around and they follow the roads. And about every 10 miles or so in our country, you've got a little city built up. Why is Parrotsville built up as Parrotsville? You are aware that Parrotsville is the third oldest incorporated town in Tennessee, are you not? The first one is what? Jonesboro. The second one is Dandridge, named for Martha Dandridge, Washington. And the third one is Parrotsville. About every 10 miles or so, there was a little watering hole that grew up because that's about the distance that you can travel, 10 miles, unless if you're on a stagecoach or something like that. So you see how these towns kind of came up around on the roads. Had to be roads, had to be water. And so in this area right here, right in the mountains, not many towns up in the mountains because there's not much water in the towns that are in the mountains. But Hebron is one of those cities in the old town. Beersheba is the place where Abraham eventually settled in. But for a while he lived right here in Hebron. Plains. It's not a desert. It's a wilderness. Wilderness is not a desert. A desert is a sandy, a wilderness. It's got grass. Yeah, there's green stuff that grows there. That's a Bedouin village right there, and that's where the sheik lives in the big house there. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abram, Yitzchak, and Jacob. Am I impressing you with my language of the Bible? Abraham, Avraham, Yitzchak. You've heard that. Isaac, Yitzchak, Moses, all these different names, and Jacob, the patriarchs. The Bible says that Sarah died in Kiriath Arba. Now you already know where Kiriath Arba is. Where is it today? Hebron. It's called Hebron today. The same as Hebron. There it is. You cheated. Did you read ahead? The same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham, I'll act like I ignore that. Abraham, whose name has now changed from what? Abram, high father, to Abraham, father of many nations. Now, God changed that. God changed Jacob to Israel. You shall call his name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. Notice that Jesus' name didn't have to be changed, because he was named from the get-go as to what his purpose and goal was. Going to be Jesus the Christ. He came to mourn. She died in Kiriath Arba, Hebron. And he came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of the Machpelah before Mamre. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. That's the agreement that Abraham made. The man who owned the property had a title deed to Canaan. God had given him a title deed. Wherever you walk, wherever the sole of your foot touches, that I will give to you. So it behooved Abraham to keep walking. And everywhere he went, he would say, got another square foot. There's another square foot. There's another square foot. But when his wife died, he had to make an agreement to buy a burial plot for her. Now that arrangement is very important. I'm going to share with you why in the time that we have. Today, I think I've got a picture of it. Now you're going to look at this picture and you're going to say, I know who that guy is. Let me see if I can find him right quick. Oh, there he is. Does he look like Dracula? Kind of looks like Dracula in a way, doesn't he? This is Theodore Herzl. Is that the way you pronounce that, Jordan? H-E-R-T-Z-L-E. Herzl. At or near 1948, when Israel became a nation, one of the selling points that they had was the fact that they had already bought a piece of property in Israel. You have? And he produced a copy of the Scriptures, which is a historical document. The Bible is a very reliable historical document, and he held it up in front of the UN at that time, which was called the League of Nations and the UN, and said, we bought a piece of property. We made an agreement in, what's the word, perpetuity, which means what? From now on, through the air system, we bought a piece of property in Hebron. Now, you can argue whether we own the rest of it, but we own Hebron. That's where we got started. That's one of the earth-shaking decisions that was made in the Old Testament that still is in effect today. Think about that. The Bible, 4,000 years ago, mentioned this, and there he is, Theodore Herzl, at the UN, recording, entered into the records of Abraham's purchase of a burial site in Hebron. Amazing, isn't it? Any thoughts or comments about that? That's one of those legal documents. That's one of those legal eagles that you use every bullet you got in your gun, Barney. You have to have all the ammunition that you can. One of their selling points was the fact that they had already purchased. They had already purchased at least a burial site in Hebron. In the red, that is where the city of Hebron is located. Now, just so you can kind of get an idea of where we're talking about here. Hebron, in the high country, Bethlehem and Jerusalem, there's a spine of mountains that goes right up through there. Those are the mountains of Moriah, or Moriah, and that's an area that goes right up through the center. It doesn't go up to the top up there. I wish the map did, but perhaps later on we've got one that does. But a spine of mountains goes right up through there called the Mountains of Moriah, and in Jerusalem is a peak, one of the peaks of the Mountains of Moriah called Mount Moriah. Judea, Bethlehem right in this area, Hebron right in this area, and then comes on down toward Beersheba in the plain area down here. En-Gedi is a kind of a fortress stronghold of King David on the Dead Sea, near the extra-biblical city of Masada. Masada is not found in the extra-biblical, in the Bible record, but we know all about it. Mount Nebo, who's buried there? Who's buried on Mount Nebo? We don't know where the burial site is, but we know it's on the Mount Nebo somewhere or another. Moses. Jericho at the top. Another one of those walled cities. Hebron is the one we're looking at tonight. Over here on the coast, Ashdod, Gaza, these areas over here are the Gaza Strip. Okay? Hebron right there in the center of the West Bank. Keep going. The oak tree on the plains of Mamre. Oak tree was a very famous, I don't know if that's an actual picture of an oak tree or not, I mean, of that oak tree. When we were there in Jericho, we were shown the tree that Zacchaeus climbed. I don't know about that. But there is a great old big, there's only one, so it had to be the one, right? It had to be. Oh, yeah, yeah. There's sycamore trees. To us, sycamore trees grow way up with no limb. You know, out there they're just huge, big, wide trees. They're easy to climb. Anybody can climb those sycamore trees. Zacchaeus climbed up in the first limb and was sitting there watching the crowd go by. Here is an oak tree called the Plain of Mamre, the oak tree of Mamre. And beside that is a little town called Kirjath Arba. Mamre is a plain area outside, about a mile and a half outside of Hebron. See, everybody would gather in the city of Hebron when the enemy next door, the guy next door that wants what you got, he comes knocking on your wall. Everybody goes inside the city wall. But the farmers are all out there in Mamre and those areas, those flat areas out there, growing the bees and the lambs and the cattle and the grains and stuff like that. The West Bank, Hebron is one of those cities that's in that West Bank. Okay? Now, Hebron is found in the Bible in many different places. The 12 spies came through there. Remember the 12 spies? 12 spies. This is probably a route from Kadesh Barnea, which is where they started from, through Arad to Hebron, right up to Bethel. They came right up that center of the land. And somewhere in there, probably in this area, is when they saw all that lush farmland. Those grapes that took 2 men on a pole to carry one big bundle of grapes and all those different things. Hebron, the valley of Eshcol, is the valley of the grape vineyards. Eshcol, grape vineyards. They went through Hebron. That's part of what they did. In the Old Testament, Hebron they fought against Joshua. When Joshua was taking the city, taking the land, Hebron, the king of Hebron, got a coalition of forces, and they decided they're going to stop this by coming in here. And so they lost. Fish on you. And they were given to a man named Caleb. Caleb was one of the 2 spies that said we can take the land. Remember the 2 spies? What's the other one's name? Joshua, our old friend General Joshua. Before he made general, he was a buck private in those days. And as he went up, he and Caleb said, "Hey, listen, what's the matter with you people? What do you mean we can't? Look, we can do that. We can knock them people out of the way. We can give them what for?" And so they turned back. They believed majority rules. The people believed the 10 spies and not the 2. And they turned back into the wilderness and went back in the dark. Went way back in here, and we kind of lose track of them because they're just kind of wandering around in the wilderness, being led by God. And all that time, Joshua and Caleb are saying, I told you we could do it. I told you we could do it. You wouldn't believe me. Here we are now wandering around. 40 years later, all of those folks are dead, except, guess who? Joshua and Caleb, and the babies that were less than, they were children, and possibly some Levites. You got to have some preachers. Got to have some preachers to keep you straight. Moses is gone. Joshua and Caleb are the only 2 adults that are left. And he says, I want my property. I want my Hebron. Hebron's been given to me. I want it. I'm going to go take it. So he walks over there with a group of people, and he takes Hebron, and that's why he owns Hebron. Israel owns Hebron because Abraham bought it and Caleb took it. I want my mountain. I want my mountain. And it was given to Caleb. Any thoughts or comments about that? We have 10 minutes. Yep. Yeah, lots of people. The Canaanites. Canaan was the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. So that's the people that settled in that area, the Canaanites. And they were there too. They had a title deed too. Here comes this upstart saying, Joshua, listen, we're here. We're here. And they said, excuse me, who are you? I'm representing Almighty Yahweh God. He gave us this property. Excuse me, our God gave it to us. So they have to duke it out. This is Joshua leading his army of Israelis. And they went in. It was a long, drawn-out battle that they took the land. I've got what could very well be right there. That's probably a pretty good thing. When they started from Gilgal, they went to Gibeon, Beth Horon, in the Ajalon Valley, down through here, Lachish, Eglon, Hebron. Oh, there's Hebron, Dubois, and then right on back up. So more than likely, that's where the army took it, the southern campaign, the southern part. They went through and they took all these little towns, and each little town is a walled city. See, they took those little walled cities. Hebron is one of them. And then Joshua said, "Excuse me, fellas, I'm going to stay right here. You can go on. I'll help you take it. I'll help you take Hebron, but this is mine. This belongs to me. It belongs to Mick." How you figure? Well, and it kind of worked. It kind of worked. Okay, we'll let that ride. Yes, sir. Okay.
I talked to old man over in Patterson. He was in his 90s. And he told me that his daddy told him this. Now, if you figure out it was about 250 years ago that from Jonesboro to Parisville is a day's travel.
Okay.
And there's a military outpost. He told me and took me there. And I thought it was no corn crib. He said it'd been there hundreds of years.
Called it a fort.
Nobody wouldn't touch it, tear it down. They even built the road around it.
Yep.
The old road. You know where I'm talking
Yeah, sure. You can still see it today.
And he said that it was one, to me this is interesting. I don't know how many people know this, David might. But he said it was one day's travel from Parisville to Danville.
Horseback.
Everybody, horseback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Danbridge was one of the biggest military outposts that they was.
That's right.
I mean, they was war fought in Danbridge and Jonesboro too. And to me, it's kind of like that there, the way they travel.
Sure, they just traveled to the cities. The Dandridge family lived there around the Dandridge people, and George would come through here. He'd come right through Parrotsville because that's where the road went. You're talking about George Washington. You do remember George? Yeah, George would come right through here and stop at Jonesboro, stop at Parrotsville, and then go on down to visit Miss Martha. Finally, he popped the question, and the rest, as they say, is history. That's not the courthouse, but I know it's common. That big house, the big Gilliland house there. Yeah, that big old house is there. That's the ruins. That's called a tell. A tell is the ruins of a community. In Israel, there is a new city called Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, new city. Tel Aviv, built in the 1940s. Beautiful place, right on the Mediterranean Sea. A new city. Nobody in their right mind would want to live in Jerusalem. Are you kidding me? And yet that's where God said, "I want you to live." But they built Tel Aviv because that's where the airport is. That's where that's not Dulles. Ben Gurion Airport is there down in Tel Aviv. All this stuff I took a course, one of the most important courses I ever took, in systematic theology. Everything just makes sense when you put it where it's supposed to go. Everything about the Bible just makes sense from day one to day zero, if you put it where it's supposed to be. Any thoughts or comments? We're not going to finish this, so I'm not even going to try to, but I'll be back. Okay? Hebron. I hope you find that it is interesting. You're not going to see those names right there because those are names that they're long gone, except for Hebron. Oh, I told you that it's very much in the news today. When we were there, 1981, our guide, Z. Goffney, a major in the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, said, wherever you go, make sure the guard can see you. Wherever you go, you're wandering around in the tomb of the Machpelah. If he loses sight of you, guess what? You're liable to lose. You're liable to lose. He's got to see you. So you've got to see him. You're perfectly safe if you can see him and he can see you. Later on, the PLO and the Arabs took it over. Now then, the Jewish people are demonstrating to take it back. And they have opened it, by the way, to Christians now to go into the tomb of who's buried there? Sarah and Rebecca and many people say Joseph is. Oh, that's what the Jewish tradition, but who do we know for sure? You got 4 of them. Abraham. Many people talk, even Joseph is buried there. That's why it's so important to the Arabs. They don't care where Jesus was buried. They don't care. They don't give a flip about Jesus Christ. Man, I get the heebie-jeebies just saying that. But they don't care about who Jesus is or what he did. But Abraham, Father Abraham, the burial site, I'll show it to you. I'll skip ahead and show it to you. Oh, man, I don't know if inside that building that Dale mentioned right there, built by King Herod. Whoa. Now, wait a minute. King Herod built that? Why would King Herod build that? King Herod built the temple. Why would he build that building? Because of who's buried there. Okay? That's why this is probably an authentic site. Because it was built in the time of King Herod, which is about year 0 in that area in there. And probably the tombs, I don't think that is the actual tomb. It's back in there. But this is basically, you'll see how they're just kind of kneeling around, Christians and Jews as well. Inside that building is the tomb of Abraham, Sarah, Jacob, Leah. Where's Rachel buried? Remember Rachel? Bethlehem. She died on the way to Bethlehem doing what? Giving birth to Benjamin. They buried her on the side of the road and went right on. Very important because she was the matriarch of the family, and it's very important where she was buried. Well, it's very important here to these people where Abraham and the patriarchs are buried. And Leah, who was Leah? Huh? The bleary-eyed one. Some people say the cross-eyed one. The one you worked 5 or 7 years to get, and it's not Rachel, it's Leah. So you work another 7 years to get Rachel. Leah is buried there. She's the mother of some of those boys. Any thoughts or comments? It's time to shut her down. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. That's one of them right there. That's where the patriarch's buried.
But I mean, like, we can go back and show all this stuff. But has the Muslims got any, you all were over there, and they got any signs where the Muslims go that's supposed to be old and ancient like these?
Oh, yeah, that's one of them right there. Let's back it up. What is that? What is that right there and there? Those are minarets. That's a Muslim mosque. It's also a church. It was built by King Herod to help appease the people. It's a synagogue. It's a church. It's a mosque. It's all those things together because of who's buried there. Anything else before we shut her down? That's why it's so important in the Old Testament. You won't find it in the New Testament. Hebron is not one of those cities that has anything to do with the New Testament as such. But when you go there, you're going to learn about a lot of Old Testament things. I'm glad you guys sent me over there. I'm a little upset that you gave me a one-way ticket. I'm a little upset about that. Okay, I guess I probably deserve that. Anything from anybody else? Lord willing, we'll be back next Wednesday night. God help me. What did I do, Lord? I try to be the man you want me to be. I love you, Ronnie. You too, Earl. I love you too. You ready to pray? Jordan, lead us in prayer, brother. Just more Bible study. Thank you, Lord.
Learn and become enthused about your word.
Yes.
Help us to learn more about it and grow deeper. Lord, pray that you be with us as we lead this message. Those on the prayer list, be with everybody. Pray that you just have your will done in our lives. Go out somewhere.
That's right.
Show this, whether it's through teaching, Sunday school, whatever it may be, but use it to prove you true over and over again. Help us to be what you would have us to be. Give us where we fit.
I know we're dismissed and everything, but let me just share this with you. I ran into a lady, very prominent lady in town here. I didn't know who she was. I mean, I knew who she was, but I didn't know what she was. And we were up at the doctor's office. I went to my heart doctor, and she was in there. She said, "You don't remember me?" I said, "Well, yeah, I know who you are. I could give you her name, but I won't. Wild horses couldn't drag it out of me." She said, "Do you remember when I came to your church?" And I said, I really don't. I'm sorry, I really don't. She said, "I was just a little girl. And I sat right there, and I listened, and I went to your children's church, and I am what I am today because of West End Baptist Church." That makes it all worthwhile, guys. They're soaking it up like little sponges. Let's give them something to soak up. Amen. God bless you, folks.